The massive exploration vessel Star Seeker drifted slowly through the darkness of deep space, its sensors scanning the endless void. Captain James Reed stood on the bridge, his tall frame reflected in the polished surfaces of the control panels. His four-armed helmsman, Officer Briggs, manipulated the controls with practiced ease. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual in Sector 7, reported Officer Briggs, his outer arms adjusting the sensor displays while his inner arms maintained the ship's course. "It appears to be a derelict vessel." Reed walked over to the main display, his boots clicking against the metal floor. The scan showed a large object floating motionless against the backdrop of distant stars. "Magnify," he ordered, stroking his gray beard thoughtfully. The image zoomed in, revealing a ship unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. Its hull was dark and angular, covered in what appeared to be primitive armor plating. The vessel was massive, nearly twice the size of the Star Seeker, but looked outdated by Council standards. "Look at those basic thrusters," laughed Lieutenant Park from his station. "They're using combustion engines. This thing must be ancient." Reed smiled, sharing his crew's amusement. The Council's fleet used advanced quantum drives and energy propulsion. The idea of a ship using chemical propulsion seemed almost funny to them. "Sir, I'm detecting faint power readings," reported Officer Briggs. "Very weak, but they're there. Probably just background radiation trapped in the hull." Reed dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Any life signs?" "None, Captain. The ship appears completely dead." Reed ordered the Star Seeker to move closer. As they approached, more details became visible. The hull bore markings in an unfamiliar script, and what looked like weapon ports lined its sides. But the weapons were nothing like the energy cannons used by modern ships. They appeared to be simple projectile launchers. "This must be from a civilization that died out before achieving proper spaceflight," Reed concluded. "Look at those crude weapon systems. They were still using physical ammunition." The bridge crew shared another laugh. The idea of fighting space battles with solid projectiles seemed ridiculous to them. Their shields could easily deflect such primitive attacks. "Sir, what should we do with it?" asked Lieutenant Park. Reed thought for a moment. The Council would be interested in studying any new civilization they discovered, even a dead one. "Prepare the tractor beams. We'll tow it back to Central Station. It'll make an interesting museum piece." As the crew worked to position their ship, Officer Briggs continued scanning the derelict vessel. Something about the power readings bothered him. They seemed to pulse in an oddly regular pattern. But when he adjusted the sensors for a deeper scan, the readings disappeared completely. "Having trouble with your equipment?" Reed asked, noticing Briggs's confusion. "No, sir. Just thought I saw something strange. Must have been a sensor ghost." The tractor beams activated, bathing the ancient ship in blue light. As they prepared to tow it, Reed studied the vessel one final time. Despite its primitive appearance, something about it commanded attention. The angular design spoke of function over form, like a weapon stripped down to its essential purpose. "What should we call it in the report?" Lieutenant Park asked. Reed smiled, still amused by their find. "Call it Relic, because that's all it is, a leftover from a civilization that never made it to the stars." The Star Seeker's engines hummed as it began towing its prize. None of the crew noticed the subtle changes in the derelict ship's power readings. Deep within its armored hull, ancient systems noted the presence of the tractor beam, analyzed its frequency, and added the data to its archives. In darkness that had lasted centuries, circuits designed to wait patiently carried out their programming. The ship they called Relic remained silent, but it was far from dead. It was waiting, just as it had been programmed to do, for the right moment, for the right people. For now, it would let them laugh. The Central Station's grand meeting hall buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of alien diplomats filled the circular chamber, their varied forms creating a living rainbow of colors and shades. At the center of attention stood three humans in simple blue uniforms, their presence causing quite a stir among the council members. Ambassador Thomas stood calmly at the speaking platform, his weathered face showing no reaction to the whispers around him. Behind him, his two assistants, Mark and Lisa, maintained equally neutral expressions. Their ship, a modest vessel with basic ion drives, had docked at the station earlier that day. "So, these are humans," said Council Leader Dax, his crystalline form catching the light as he moved. "We've been watching your early attempts at space travel. Quite interesting." Thomas smiled politely. "We're grateful for the invitation to join the Galactic Council. Humanity is ready to take its place among the stars." A laugh rippled through the chamber. "Ready?" questioned another council member, her tentacles waving in amusement. "Your ships still use ion propulsion. You haven't even mastered basic quantum technology." "We progress at our own pace," Thomas replied simply. "Each civilization chooses its path." Council Leader Dax raised his crystalline appendage for silence. "Speaking of primitive vessels, Captain Reed recently made an interesting discovery. Perhaps our human friends can shed some light on it." The massive view screen behind the platform lit up, showing the vessel they'd found in deep space. Thomas and his assistants turned to look, their faces carefully controlled. "We found this relic drifting in Sector 7, Captain Reed announced proudly. "Based on its design, we believed it belonged to a failed civilization. But those markings," he zoomed in on the hull, "they're human writing, aren't they?" Mark's hand tightened slightly on his datavat. Lisa's eyes narrowed just a fraction. But Thomas's face remained perfectly calm. "Yes," Thomas admitted. "That's an old Earth script. The ship appears to be one of ours, lost during our early exploration days." The chamber erupted in laughter again. "You mean you actually use projectile weapons in space?" One delegate called out. "How did you expect to fight anything with such primitive technology?" "We were young and learning," Thomas replied diplomatically. "That ship represents our past, not our present." Council Leader Dax leaned forward. "We've placed it in our military museum. Would you like to see it? Perhaps explain its fascinating design choices." Thomas glanced at his assistants, a silent message passing between them. "We would be honored," he said. The museum was a vast chamber filled with weapons and ships from across the galaxy. The human vessel dominated one entire section, its dark hull standing in stark contrast to the sleek designs around it. "We can't get inside," Captain Reed explained as they approached. "The hull seems to be sealed with some kind of mechanical system, quite primitive, but surprisingly stubborn." Thomas walked slowly around the ship's perimeter, his hand occasionally brushing against the hull. "Sometimes old things are built to last," he said quietly. "Old things belong in museums." Reed laughed. "Like this one. We're keeping it as an example of how far behind humans are in space technology." Lisa stopped near what looked like a sensor array. For just a moment, a faint light pulsed beneath her hand. She pulled back quickly, but not before Mark noticed. He gave her a warning look. "Thank you for showing us this piece of our history," Thomas said formally. "We should return to the diplomatic discussions." As they left the museum, Council Leader Dax spoke privately to Captain Reed. They seemed unusually interested in that old wreck. "Probably embarrassed by it," Reed replied. "Their current ships aren't much more advanced." But later that night, when the museum was empty, something stirred inside the old warship. Deep in its circuits, new data was being processed. Human DNA detected, security protocols updating, weapon systems running silent diagnostics. The ship they called Relic had confirmed what it needed to know. Now it just had to wait a little longer. The first warning came from the outer sensor ring. Alarms blared through Central Station's corridors, their harsh sound breaking the normal peace of the diplomatic quarter. Council Leader Dax rushed to the command center, his crystalline form reflecting the flashing red emergency lights. "Report," he demanded, taking his position at the central platform. Multiple ships dropping out of quantum space, the sensor officer announced, her tentacles moving rapidly across the control panel. "At least 50 vessels. No, wait. Over 100 now." The main screen showed a terrifying sight. A swarm of black ships appeared from quantum jumps, their organic-looking hulls seeming to absorb the starlight. Each ship was covered in sharp, blade-like protrusions. "The swarm," Captain Reed whispered, his face pale. "They found us." The swarm was the stuff of nightmares, a species that consumed everything in its path. The Council had fought them before, but never faced such a large attack force. "Raise all shields," Dax ordered. "Get our defense fleet in position, and evacuate all diplomats to the safe zones." The station's powerful shields hummed to life, creating a shimming barrier between them and the approaching enemy. The Council's defense ships moved to protect the station, their weapons charging. But something was wrong. The first swarm ship fired, its beam a sickly green color. When it hit the station's shields, instead of being stopped, it passed right through. Alarms screamed as systems began failing. "Impossible," the shield operator shouted. "They've adapted. Our shields aren't stopping their weapons." More swarm ships opened fire. Each shot passed through the Council's defenses like they weren't even there. The defense fleet fought back, but their weapons seemed to do little damage to the swarm's improved armor. In the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Thomas and his assistants watched the battle through a viewing window. Mark typed rapidly on his datapad, while Lisa spoke quietly into a communicator. "Sir," Mark said to Thomas, "we need to act now." Thomas nodded slowly. "We tried to do this peacefully," he said. "We wanted to join the Council properly, prove ourselves gradually." He turned and began walking quickly toward the museum section. "But we can't watch them die." The three humans ran through the chaos of evacuating aliens. When they reached the museum, they found Council leader Dax already there, staring helplessly at the tactical displays. "You need to evacuate," Dax told them when they entered. "The safe zones won't help against the swarm's new weapons." Thomas interrupted. "But we can help." "Help?" Captain Reed laughed bitterly from his position near the displays. "With what?" "Your primitive ion drives." Another explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered. "With that," Lisa said, pointing at the old human warship. Reed stared at them in disbelief. "That museum piece, it's dead. It's using technology hundreds of years behind us." "No," Thomas said quietly. "It's not." He walked up to the ship's hull and placed his hand on a seemingly blank section. "Command override Thomas 7 Alpha. Authorization, Earth Defense Force." The hull under his hand began to glow. Lines of light spread out from his palm, racing along patterns that had been invisible before. A deep hum filled the museum chamber. What are you doing?" Dax asked, his crystalline form vibrating with the ship's growing power. "Showing you why we've been so interested in our old relic," Mark answered, moving to a section of hull that was now sliding open. The ship's systems were powering up fully now. Panels shifted, revealing weapons far more advanced than the simple projectile launchers they'd appeared to be. The hull itself seemed to be changing, the dull metal growing darker and somehow deeper, like looking into a starless night. "We call it the Defender," Thomas said as the ship came alive around them. "And it's humanity's greatest warship." Another explosion hit the station. Through the museum's windows, they could see swarm ships approaching. "Time to show the Council," Lisa said grimly, "what humanity can really do." Inside the Defender's bridge, everything was changing. Walls that had seemed like basic metal were flowing like liquid, forming control stations and holographic displays. Thomas led the way, with Mark and Lisa taking their positions at stations that seemed to build themselves around them. Behind them, Council leader Dax and Captain Reed watched in stunned silence. "Impossible," Reed whispered, touching one of the shifting walls. "This material, it's responding like it's alive." "Smart matter," Lisa explained, her hands dancing over controls that appeared beneath them. "The entire ship is made of it. What you saw outside was just its sleeping form." The bridge hummed with growing power. Lights pulsed along the walls in patterns that seemed to follow the crew's movements. Above them, a holographic display showed the battle raging outside. Council ships falling to the swarm's attacks. All systems online, Mark reported. Quantum core stable. Shield grid activating. Thomas settled into the captain's chair, which had formed from the floor itself. Begin full revival sequence. Lisa, get us access to the station's defense grid. Mark, power up all weapons. We need to move fast. A soft female voice filled the bridge. Welcome back, humans. This unit has waited 247 years, 153 days, 14 hours for your return. Hello, Alice, Thomas said warmly. Sorry we kept you waiting. Your timing is acceptable, the AI responded, though these aliens have been quite rude about my appearance. Dax stepped forward, his crystalline form reflecting the shifting lights. This technology, it's beyond anything the Council has ever seen. How long have you? He was interrupted by another explosion that rocked the station. Through the holographic display, they watched 3 more Council ships fall to the swarm's attacks. Time for explanations later, Thomas said firmly. Alice, show them what a real warship can do. The defender's hull rippled, layers of smart matter flowing like water. The dull metal surface transformed into something that seemed to drink in light itself. Weapon ports appeared where none had been before, but these weren't the primitive projectile launchers the Council had mocked. These were weapons that made Captain Reed's eyes widen in disbelief. Quantum phase cannons, he breathed. Temporal distortion arrays. But those are just theoretical. For you, maybe, Lisa said, not looking up from her station. Shields at full power. Mark, are the targeting systems ready? Locked and loaded, Mark confirmed. Alice has already analyzed their new weapon frequencies. Our shields are adapted. Thomas leaned forward in his chair. Alice, disconnect us from the museum docking clamps. Time to show the swarm why humans don't share all their toys. The ship lifted smoothly from its berth. Smart matter flowed across its surface, forming new armor plates and energy channeling systems. The simple-looking thrusters transformed, quantum drive nodes emerging from what had appeared to be primitive engines. By the stars, Dax whispered, watching the transformation. All this time, you could have. We wanted peace. Thomas interrupted. We wanted to earn our place, not take it by force. But right now, your people need help. Outside, the swarm ships noticed the new vessel emerging from the station. Several broke off their attack, turning to face this unexpected threat. They're scanning us, Mark reported, trying to analyze our capabilities. Let them look, Lisa said with a grim smile. They won't understand what they're seeing anyway. The first swarm ship fired its green energy beam, the same weapon that had cut through the Council's best shields like paper. It hit the defender's shields and simply vanished. Shield absorption at 100%, Alice reported calmly. Their weapon signature has been analyzed and countered. Shall I demonstrate our response? Thomas nodded. Show them what humanity's been keeping in reserve. The defender's hull pulsed with power, weapons that had been hidden for centuries prepared to fire. In the bridge, even Captain Reed and Council leader Dax found themselves holding their breath. The real battle was about to begin. The defender moved like nothing the Council had ever seen. Its dark hull flowed and shifted, adapting to each attack as the swarm ships opened fire. Green energy beams that had torn through Council shields scattered harmlessly against its defenses. Multiple targets locked, Mark announced from his station. Permission to return fire. Thomas nodded. Alice, show them what Earth's finest can do. The ship's response was devastating. Quantum phase cannons fired, their beams shifting through multiple dimensions at once. The first volley struck 3 swarm ships. Instead of hitting shields or armor, the beams simply phased the targeted sections out of existence. Clean, precise cuts appeared in the organic hulls. Impossible, Captain Reed gasped, watching the battle through the bridge's holographic display. Those ships have the strongest armor we've ever encountered. Armor only works if it exists in the same dimension as the weapon, Lisa explained, her hands dancing across her controls. Our quantum weapons bypass conventional defenses completely. The swarm ships regrouped, changing tactics. They moved in a complex pattern, trying to surround the defender. More green beams fired, joined by missiles that seemed to bend space around them. New weapon type detected, Alice reported calmly. Space-folding warheads. Analyzing. Countermeasures deployed. The defender's hull rippled again. The missiles struck, but instead of exploding, they simply vanished. A moment later, they reappeared behind the swarm ships, striking their own vessels. Smart matter hull, Mark explained to the stunned council members. It can create micro-wormholes to redirect attacks. The battle intensified. The swarm ships launched everything they had, filling space with a web of deadly energy. But the defender was always one step ahead. Its AI predicting attack patterns, its smart matter hull adapting to each new threat. They're targeting the station again, Lisa warned, pointing to a group of swarm ships breaking away from the main battle. Not on our watch, Thomas said firmly. Alice, deploy the temporal nets. The air around the defender shimmered. Rains of energy spread out like ripples in a pond, but these ripples moved through time as well as space. When they reached the attacking swarm ships, time itself seemed to slow around them. The organic vessels moved as if trapped in honey, their weapons charging at a fraction of normal speed. By all the stars, Dax whispered, his crystalline form vibrating with excitement. You can control time itself. To a limited degree, Thomas admitted. It's not something we use lightly. The trapped swarm ships made easy targets. The defenders' weapons carved through them with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying where possible. Each shot showed years of human innovation. Each maneuver demonstrated centuries of hidden advancement. Enemy fleet at 60% losses, Alice reported. They are attempting to regroup for a mass quantum jump. Not this time, Lisa said grimly. Quantum anchor deployed. Space twisted around the battlefield as the defender activated another hidden system. The swarm ship's quantum drives flared but failed to engage. They were trapped in normal space, their best escape route denied. You can block quantum jumps, Reed asked in disbelief. Even the Council hasn't managed that. Humanity learned many things during our hidden years, Thomas replied. We just chose to wait until we were sure we could use that knowledge wisely. The battle reached its climax. The swarm ships, realizing they were trapped, launched a desperate final attack. They charged straight at the defender, weapons blazing, ready to ram if their attacks failed. Alice, Thomas commanded, show them our full power. Just once. The defender's hull turned midnight black, absorbing all light. For a moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the ship released a wave of pure quantum energy, precisely calculated and perfectly controlled. When it struck the attacking swarm ships, their organic hulls simply came apart at the molecular level, breaking down into harmless particles. The remaining swarm ships turned to retreat. The mighty fleet that had threatened the Council was now running from a single human vessel. Should we pursue? Mark asked. Thomas shook his head. They've learned their lesson. Let them spread the word. Humanity is not to be underestimated. From their place on the bridge, Dax and Reed watched in stunned silence as the defender single-handedly ended a battle that could have destroyed the Council. Neither of them was laughing at the Relic anymore. The Council's emergency chamber was silent as Ambassador Thomas stood at the center. Around him sat representatives from 100 alien species, all still shaken from the battle. The defender floated outside the station's massive windows, its dark hull now a symbol of power rather than mockery. You owe us an explanation, Council Leader Dax said, his crystalline form glowing softly in the chamber's light. That ship, your technology, why hide it all? Thomas nodded slowly. It's time we shared our full history. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and a hologram appeared above the chamber floor. It showed Earth, but not as the Council knew it. This Earth was surrounded by massive shipyards and orbital rings. 300 years ago, Thomas began, humanity reached its golden age. We mastered quantum physics, developed smart matter, created true artificial intelligence. We built wonders that would make your most advanced technology look simple. The hologram changed, showing vast fleets of ships like the Defender. We had the power to reach the stars, to expand across the galaxy. But then we learned the hardest lesson any species can face. We weren't ready for that power. What happened? Captain Reed asked quietly. We fought ourselves, Thomas said sadly. Different factions wanted to use our technology in different ways. Some wanted to conquer, others to explore, others to hide. The war that followed nearly destroyed Earth. The hologram showed battles that made the recent fight with the swarm look tiny in comparison. Ships using weapons that bent reality itself. Entire fleets erased from time. Planets scared by quantum weapons. When we finally stopped fighting, Thomas continued, we made a choice. We would start over. Build again, but slowly this time. Learn wisdom before reaching for power. Lisa stepped forward, adding to the explanation. The Defender was one of 12 Guardian ships we hid throughout the galaxy, watching, waiting, protecting humanity until we were ready to return to the stars properly. But your current ships, Reed protested. The ion drives, the basic shields. Mark smiled. All part of the plan. We forced ourselves to rebuild from scratch. Each step earned through hard work and careful thought. We didn't want to repeat our mistakes. The hologram showed modern Earth ships, their simple designs a deliberate choice rather than a limitation. We could have returned to the stars with fleets of ships like the Defender, Thomas explained. But we chose a harder path. We came in peace with basic ships, ready to learn from other species. And if we had rejected you, Dax asked, tried to conquer Earth, then you would have discovered the other Guardians, Thomas said quietly. But we hoped it wouldn't come to that. We wanted to join the galactic community the right way, through diplomacy and mutual respect, not fear. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members looked afraid, others impressed, many simply confused. But none were laughing now at humanity's primitive technology. The Defender will remain here, Thomas announced, as a gift to the council. Not as a museum piece, but as a protector. Lisa will stay to teach your people how to work with its systems, the ones we feel you're ready for. And the other Guardian ships, someone asked, will remain hidden, Thomas said firmly. Humanity's choice to grow slowly remains. We didn't reveal the Defender today because we wanted to. We did it because you needed help. The hologram showed one final image, Earth's current fleet, side by side with Council ships. This is still who we are, Thomas explained, a young species learning to be part of a larger community. The Defender represents what we can become, but only when we're truly ready. Council leader Dax rose, his crystalline form catching the light. You chose to face mockery and dismissal when you could have dominated us from the start. That shows more wisdom than all our advanced ships and weapons. We learned our wisdom through terrible mistakes, Thomas replied. If sharing our story helps others avoid the same path, then perhaps our long wait was worth it. Outside the window, the Defender's hull rippled slightly, as if agreeing with his words. The ship that had been laughed at as a relic now stood as a reminder. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in choosing not to use it. 1 month after the swarm attack, Central Station looked very different. The Defender's presence had changed more than just the station's defenses. It had changed how everyone thought about humans. Thomas stood in the new Earth Embassy, watching ships move through space outside his window. Council vessels now flew alongside human ships, their crews working together to set up new defense systems. No one mocked the ion drives anymore. Everyone understood they were a choice, not a limitation. Ambassador, Mark called from the doorway. The Council is ready for today's technology exchange. The meeting hall had been rebuilt, now featuring a mixture of Council and human design. Council leader Dax waited inside, along with representatives from 30 different species. Lisa stood at the main display, showing schematics that would have been unthinkable a month ago. These shield modifications are relatively simple, she explained, pointing to the diagrams. They won't stop everything like the Defender can, but they'll give you better protection against the Swarm's weapons. And you're sure you want to share this technology? Asked a Reptilian Council member, after keeping it hidden for so long. Thomas stepped forward. We're not sharing our most advanced systems, but basic defenses, emergency protocols, early warning systems. These can help everyone. The Swarm is still out there, and they'll return stronger next time. Speaking of strength, Dax said, his crystal form shifting colors thoughtfully. We've received reports of other hostile species moving away from Council space. Word of the Defender's power has spread. Mark smiled. Good. Fear of the unknown is a powerful deterrent. Let them wonder how many other guardianships are out there. The meeting continued, with humans and aliens working together to prepare for future threats. Outside, construction crews were attaching new quantum sensors to the station. The Defender floated nearby, its dark hull a constant reminder of humanity's hidden strength. We've also begun modifying the station's museum, a tall, blue-skinned council member reported. The human technology section will now tell the true story, how a species chose wisdom over power. Thomas nodded approvingly. Near the back of the room, he noticed Captain Reed talking with a group of human engineers. The captain, who had once laughed at their primitive technology, was now eagerly learning everything they would teach. The Swarm will think twice before attacking again, Lisa commented, changing the display to show new defensive formations. But we should prepare for other threats. The galaxy is full of surprises. Speaking of surprises, Dax said, our long-range sensors detected energy signatures matching the Defenders in distant sectors. Your other guardianships, I assume. We cannot confirm or deny that, Thomas replied with a small smile. Though I will say the Defender is never truly alone. The meeting shifted to discussing joint fleet operations. Human ships, still using their basic drives, would patrol alongside Council vessels. They didn't need to show their full power. The knowledge that they could was enough. There's something we've been wondering, one of the Council members said. If the Defender is hundreds of years old, how advanced are your current top-secret ships? Thomas shared a knowing look with Mark and Lisa. That's a question we hope you never need to learn the answer to. The Defender represents our past. Our future depends on all of us growing wiser together. As the meeting ended, Thomas walked to the window. The stars looked different now, not just dots of light, but places where other guardianships might wait, watching and protecting. Humanity's secret was out, but their greatest power remained, the wisdom to use their strength with care. The Council has approved the Joint Defense Initiative, Dax announced, joining Thomas at the window. Your people will help train our crews, and we'll share our star charts and diplomatic contacts. A fair exchange, Thomas agreed. Knowledge for knowledge, trust for trust. Outside, a new group of Council ships arrived for training. They flew past the Defender, and this time there was no laughter, no mockery, only respect. The old warship had taught them all a valuable lesson. Never judge by appearances, and wisdom sometimes means keeping your true strength hidden until it's truly needed. The age of secrets was over. The age of understanding had begun.